Welcome back to the OPEX Podcast, where fitness is explained. I am your host, Robbie Burke, and I am joined on today's show by Amy Cox from Target Nutrition. Amy is the nutritionist to Brent Fikowski, who recently finished fourth in the CrossFit Games. And on this episode, Amy and I discuss everything and anything to do with nutrition for CrossFit performance. This was a really great interview with Amy, guys. I know you're going to love it. Stay with us. Okay, Amy, thank you so much for making time to speak with me this morning. Morning for me, but evening for you, but I really appreciate it. So just for the listeners who mightn't be too familiar with your background, just fill us in.
So I'm a sports dietitian based here in Brisbane, Australia. I've been practicing for about 4.5 years now, mainly specializing in CrossFit nutrition and Olympic weightlifting nutrition. Both sports I've done in the past, so I kind of get the idea of what it's like to have nutrition to impact on your training. So that's why I guess I like it so much, is it can make such a big difference in people's days and training days. So yeah, I have my own private practice here in Brisbane, which has been going really well, and I love it. Keeps me super busy, and yeah, I got a few girls that work for me here, and they're all great as well, all dietitians, sports dietitians. So yeah. So
in other words, you hate yourself. If people who do CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting are usually people that like to torture their bodies. Why do I hate myself so much?
They like the pain. They like the pain.
Were you into CrossFit and Olympic lifting before you went to college and became a nutritionist, or did that come as you were in college or afterwards?
So when I started uni, I was getting into fitness. Like I didn't do anything really going like normal school sport. I started CrossFit maybe a year into uni.
Yeah.
And then it kind of took off. So I never thought I would ever do sports nutrition when I was actually studying. I thought I'd be doing something like with diabetes or, along with gastric based stuff.
Yeah.
So I think I only really got interested in sports nutrition maybe 6 months after I graduated, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. A lot of the dietitians there are always like, if you want to do sports nutrition, good luck. It's really hard to get work just because the field's so saturated. So I never really thought of it. But yeah, so I got into CrossFit, and I wish I knew what I knew now when I started CrossFit, because my life would have been so much easier then in terms of training. And a lot of other people around me learning how to actually recover rather than just be miserable and sore day in, day out type stuff. So, yeah.
Who would you say have been your biggest influences on you professionally?
Professionally, one of my actual uni lecturers, Gary Slater is his name. He's a really well-known sports dietitian over here. And he's done a lot of research with another lady called Louise Burke, and it just got such a good knowledge in sports nutrition.
Well, Louise is a legend, like.
Yeah, she is absolutely, like, I remember sitting in my sports nutrition lectures at the AIS, and it was just like, you're gobsmacked just at how much information comes out of her mouth. Yes. Like, can I just sit here and listen to you for a few hours, days, that type of thing.
I'm going to ask one more general question, and then we're going to get right into like nutrition for the fitness athlete. In terms of the good and the not so good things you currently see within the whole nutrition profession, like the whole nutrition field, with everything with the internet and all the information out there, what would you say are the very good things you see? And then on the other end of that spectrum, what are the not so good things you're seeing out there at the moment? And with the not so good things, what sort of solutions would you maybe offer?
So the good things is it's just making people more aware of what food actually is. Like, what is a good quality food? You've gone from, the moments of, 15 years ago where you just ate food for the sake of food. You didn't really have an idea on what it actually was. Like, what is a carb? I guarantee if you go back 10 years ago, no one would actually know what a carb was or what protein was. So that nutrition information's really come out, and people are actually more aware of what they're putting into their body. But then in saying that, that's where I think social media is taking it the opposite way. Then it's creating a lot of more of those, you need to follow this kind of diet to see a body composition change, and it's almost like the extreme. You have to be, you have to follow a keto diet, or you have to follow a paleo diet or whatever. It's very restrictive. or even just body composition. You know, you have to eat like this if you want to look like this person. So I think that's probably the hard part in with it all, is it's kind of creating bad body image for a lot of people. Now through that go, oh, I saw this person online and I want to look like this person. You know, that's probably the main issue I would say. And it's just half the information probably isn't correct either. It's just someone that's a nutrition coach or someone that has an opinion that isn't really actually scientifically sound. So that, you know, and that can go viral. So that's the hard part, I think. So it's just really solution wise, where is the information actually coming from? You know, what type of source is this, you know, person or group? How are they bringing it into, you know, are they trying to just make money out of something? You know, is it a pyramid scheme, or, you know, something like isogenics or like Herbalife? What is the actual base of all of that? Why do people, you know, want you to follow a certain diet? Is it for them to make money, or is it for you to have a good quality of life? So, you know, little things like that. I guess it's just being a bit more critical of what you see online, and even just what you hear from your friends or, you know, people that you know or you don't really even know.
Yeah, great stuff. All right, so moving in then to your area of expertise, which is programming nutrition for CrossFit athletes. What would you say are the key fundamentals for CrossFitters in terms of their nutritional requirements?
I think it's, for me, to be honest, my motto is learning to eat the right food at the right time. For something like CrossFit, depending on where you're training, what time of the day you're training, you're using up so much energy in those workouts. Like, it's just CrossFit for you. I think most people that ever follow that type of style of training would understand. So, you know, whether they're following that style of training or not, regardless, it's about that. You know, if you're not getting the right protein individually throughout the day, you're not putting your carbs in at the right time of the day, you're going to gain weight. Anything that you ever tend to overeat, you're going to gain weight. So it's trying to teach a person why they're eating, what they're eating throughout the day, and make it something that they're going to enjoy. Because I find if you're too restrictive, or you're like, you have to eat this food and only this food, generally a person isn't going to stick to it.
Yeah.
So it's more so looking at, you know, not just you have to eat this food at this time. It's, you know, why are you actually eating, and what are you doing in your day that you need to put that fuel into your body to get you through.
Yeah. Do you find that some athletes undereat more so than overeat? Like they're not usually meeting their energy requirements?
Yeah, probably a good 60%.
Wow. And how do you personally go about setting caloric needs? Like, do you have your own, like, I suppose every nutritionist has their own particular system, but is there any one that you found to be the most accurate?
Here in Australia, I've got a DEXA machine, which is body comp analysis. So you lay on a bed, tells you what your muscle mass, fat mass, and bone mass is, and that's what I use for body comp analysis.
Do you actually have one of those?
Yeah, I own one here in Brisbane.
How fucking much was that?
It's good. To be honest, it's the best thing I've ever bought. It's like so good for CrossFit though. Like, that's why I love it, because you gain so much muscle mass. So, you know, if you can actually see, like, if I look back to when I first started CrossFit and I think I gained like 5 kilos in the first couple of years. And for me, I was like, why the hell am I gaining weight? Like, I didn't understand that concept of, you know, why am I actually seeing my body weight go up when I'm eating well and I'm training?
Yeah.
So that's why I like it. And that's where I had, before I bought it, like, my clients would come to me like, my scale weight isn't changing. And because I do a lot of Skype consults, I can't do measurements or I can't do skin folds with them. So they're getting frustrated. So that's why I like the DEXA, is because you can actually see I've gained 2 kilos of muscle mass and lost 2 kilos of fat.
Yeah, it can show you the composition change, you know, because obviously we know if you're just looking at scale weight, that's not telling you the composition.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's what I use for body comp analysis. So what I do with that is I find out what their muscle mass is. So then I can work out how many calories they need using an equation. So I times their muscle mass by 22, add 500. That's the amount of calories that they need in a day.
why, just because and I'm interested, why 22 and why plus 500? Obviously it's working.
Just what the equation is. It's which equation? It's one of them.
Is that in kilos now? Is it 22 by kilo weight, is it?
Yes, kilo.
Yeah.
Kilo weight.
Yeah. I seen Joseph Agu, his one was like between 22, 24, and that usually got like their basal needs, and then if you need to add or subtract.
And then you add a factor on top of that.
Yeah. So once you set those requirements, are you then just going to their macronutrient breakdown? And a question that I have for you is, like, obviously with CrossFitters, the top CrossFitters, they train like multiple times a day, or at least twice a day, and often 3 times a day. I suppose a huge thing for them, once you set their calories and their macros, is the food type in terms of its digestibility and speed of GI clearance. So maybe just touch into how you break down the macros, what are you setting protein at, and then like how you determine carb versus fat needs, and then maybe just speak about specific food types and timing in terms of digestibility. Yeah,
okay. So once I look at that, I then go into to be honest, I actually spend a good half of their consult actually talking about training.
Yeah.
So CrossFit's varied, get it, but there's still usually some kind of consistency in their training. So for me, I'm looking at how much are they actually expelling in their training session. Are they just doing a strength block? Are they doing, a really long aerobic piece? Are they doing a high intensity based piece? And usually when I've worked with athletes for a long period of time, I know how much energy they're expelling in each one of those sessions. So I can go, you need to have this many carbs post the workout. So once I work out generally how much it is, I then go meal by meal. So every single meal generally has about 25 to 30 grams of protein.
Mm-hmm.
If they're a girl, then it might be a little bit less for snacks. But anything more than 30 grams, unless they're like 50 years plus, you can't absorb any more of it. So there's no point putting all that extra, protein in your body in one go that your body won't.
Is that true? 30 grams? Because I know that Aragon and Schoenfeld said between 20 and 40. Like, would that not depend on someone's size? Like, what if you're like a rugby player, like a pro? I know what I'm talking about. What if you're like 120 kilos?
Yeah, Islanders are meant to be a little bit more. So sometimes it's just your ethnicity that can determine it. For females, I generally go on the lower range. Males, I go a little bit more.
The higher, yeah.
And then once you hit like a master's level, so 50 plus, you actually have 40 grams of protein.
Is that because as we get older, we need more protein? But isn't it a bit of a it's a bit of a paradox? Like, well, we need more because we get more catabolic as we get older. But does our ability to be able to absorb and utilize protein get worse as we get older?
Yeah.
That's what would you do? Sorry, we're digressing a little bit here, but what would you do in that instance? Because I find that topic very interesting, that like our protein requirements actually go up, but our ability to utilize it goes down as we get older.
I would say the utilize goes down because your gut motility will change over time. It gets slower for you to digest.
But how do we get our protein in then? Like, it's going up as we get older, but our ability to use it goes down. Like our ability to digest.
How do you get it in? You mean like in terms of how you digest it?
Yeah. If the needs are either staying the same or going up as we get older, but our ability to utilize is getting worse, like what can we do to offset that?
Oh, nothing. Don't get old.
You're getting old, motherfucker.
It's just it's life, like females and menopause. No matter what, it's going to happen. So, it's what your body's going to be like going into that. The better you're sitting, the less likely you're going to have the issue with menopause. So get old. That's what your metabolism slows down. Everything gets harder. It's a sucky part of getting old, unfortunately.
Fuck you, Mother Nature.
Yeah. So, that's what I look at. Protein. So your protein's regularly, and that's every 3 hours. I normally feed them every 3 to 4. If it's any closer than 3 hours, your body thinks it's the same dose of protein.
Okay.
So there's no point doubling up. So that's where, like, if people have a protein shake and then an hour later have a meal, or half an hour have a meal, it's pointless. Your body thinks that second dose of protein isn't actually anything. So I generally use food. I don't really use protein powders too much unless, like, people, CrossFit, it takes away your appetite, suppresses your appetite at times. So you got to get something in. So that's probably the first thing that I look at, and that's just being consistent, because as soon as you're not consistent with your protein intake, especially if you're a female, males get it a little bit easier having testosterone. But as soon as you're not consistent and you're training frequently, you're more likely to lose that muscle mass, which, you know, if you're trying to get stronger and trying to get fitter, it's not the best thing for you.
Yeah. Okay, so you set protein, then how do you go about with the other two macros? Are you, like, is there a minimum requirement you look for fats just for hormonal health and just basic overall health, and then after that it's really just carbs fill the rest of the void?
Yeah. So I look at carbs next, to be honest.
Okay.
And what I do with your carbs is I then look at and this is probably my biggest advice to CrossFitters, is you can't eat the same amount of carbs every day. Protein, you can get away with the same thing. Fat kind of changes depending on, but it's not as much. But carbs should always change, because think about it, like carbs are your body's general fuel source. It's the main fuel source. So if you've got some days that you do a 10-minute workout, you're probably going to use a different amount of fuel to a workout that you would do for 30 minutes on Metcon.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you overeat on a day, then you're going to store body fat. If you undereat on another day, then you're going to be tired, you're going to be lethargic, you're going to crave food like no tomorrow, and then that can end up leading to you overeating at some point of the day or the following day, or it might be at the end of the week. So that's where carbs are really important to time well, because if you don't get the timing right, you know, life is just a lot harder than what it needs to, basically. So just so much harder. Yeah. So what I look at then is going into a training session, generally I load them up in carbs, because if you go into a session and you're not well fueled, and you don't have enough of that carb stored, because you're doing a high intensity based sport, you're using carbs or you're using glycogen as a fuel source. So if you don't have that fuel stored or enough of it, your body can't break fat down fast enough to create that fuel. So then it uses your muscle mass, which again, we're trying not to lose, we're trying to build up. So that's where I load them going into a workout. So then when you go into training, you can push your capacity. You can work at 100%. You feel like you can fly, you know, super fit, feeling strong. And that one just makes a person feel better in themselves, because they feel like they're pushing their capacity. And then depending on that session, that's when then I replace it after. And, you know, some of the athletes, I work with Brent Fikowski. So for him, I know after a really, really intense workout that's got like an air bike, he always burns more than something that he would just sit and do monotonously for 15 minutes. Just because it tanks him. So, you know, little things like that, I get that sense of awareness of, okay, how are you feeling? How have you recovered from this workout? And I just barter back and forth to go, are you craving food? Are you really tired? You know, you're waking up tired in the morning, and use those symptoms to gauge whether they're eating enough carbs or not. Yeah.
And so in terms then of the actual sources, because again, like kind of belly comfort going into, you know, sessions and, you know, digestibility and passing the GI tract, what sort of recommendations are you looking at there in terms of, I suppose, the timing of the macronutrients and then like the types, you know? So like, as I said to you this morning there, like I'm going to train after this and I just had sweet potato and like basically scrambled egg, because that gets out of my stomach pretty quick. Whereas, you know, if you had like, I don't know, big steak and loads of vegetables, you'd be still full a few hours later, you know? So just in terms of, the macro timing and then the types of foods in terms of getting through the GI tract, what would you be recommending for most CrossFitters?
So I try and keep it nice and simple going into training. And sometimes it even just depends on the person. Like I try and get the meal in within about an hour and a half of your training session. If you're training early in the morning, then I keep it really simple. Like if they're going in at 5:30, some people don't have anything, or it might just be as simple as a piece of fruit, slice of bread. It could be a couple pieces of dried fruit, just to start them. If it's later on in the day, like things like muesli and yogurt or oats, I generally find pretty simple to digest going in. If they really struggle with food, they feel like that's going to come up, then I'll put a decent meal in about 2 to 3 hours before, and that might be a rice-based or a bit more potato, depends on what they prefer. And then about an hour before, I top them up. So I give them a top-up snack. So it could be a piece of fruit or like a really good quality muesli bar that's oat-based, like properly oat-based. And that just tops them up going into a session, so they feel like they can still go.
And do you ever use any liquid sources? If so, like again, someone's trained very early in the morning, or if there are someone says, listen, I just can't stomach solid food, like is a liquid source okay going into training?
Yeah, generally not as much, because I find, like, again, it depends on the person, but I find you use up that energy really quickly. So you can use up that liquid source of energy within half an hour to an hour. So if you're having it half an hour before or an hour before, by the time you get to training, you can actually hit a bit of a lag. So it just depends on the type. Like some are slower release, or I'll combine it. So I'll give them a quick source of energy and a slow releasing energy. So the carb drink is generally always a fast releasing carb. So I'll combine it with something else, but not too much. I more save the drinks for either during training. So if you're after 2 hours, I'll put something carb-based in during. And then post-training, I'll put the liquid carbs in there, especially depending on the weight of the person. Yeah. Like if you weigh 90 to 100, 110 kilos, like you need fluid carbs. It's just, you have to eat so much food in order to replace what you burnt off, because you have more muscle mass generally.
And what sort of liquid carbohydrate sources used would be like a Fertago or?
It depends what country you're in.
Yeah.
It's usually a dextrose-based powder. Yeah. Or I'll use like a Gatorade powder over here. Staminade we have as well over here, which is a bit of like electrolyte-based drink. So, because it's really, really hot where I live, and even north. So like I'll combine electrolytes into the drinks as well, depending on where the person lives. And then I'll add food in after. So generally the quick release carbs I'll put in during training or after.
So because CrossFit, is such a mixed modal sport, the nutritional demands can be very different from one piece to another in terms of the modality or the actual training session or event in a regionals or a games. How do you go about kind of prescribing or trying to optimize as much as possible the nutrition for what is about to take place in terms of a particular session or event? So obviously the fueling for, let's say like the marathon row there in the games, the fueling for that would obviously have to be different than like say the CrossFit total,
Oh, yeah.
Like 100%. Acutely. So like, can you maybe address like how do you go about, optimize nutrition for like, a very heavy strength piece versus, an aerobic piece versus then a very taxing mixed modal, highly glycolytic piece like chaos or something like that,
Yeah. Okay. So, like for example, Brent, with what I even did with him. So for the total, because they're warming up for a good 20, half an hour, 45 minutes before. So they're already using a lot of energy warming up before they even come out and lift. So something like that, I'd be like, okay, well, drink some extra fluid-based carbs during the end of your warm-up. So then by the time you actually come out, you've got some energy there to actually do your 3 heavy lifts. Because when you're doing those 3 types of lift, you would use up so much glycogen or carbs in that store. Because it just depends on the person. You're still going to use up a lot. Brent, for example, he weighs 100 kilos. So he's going to use up a lot more energy than what a person would if they were 80 kilos because he's got more muscle mass. So that's the difference even in just athlete to athlete is some are just going to need more because they're bigger and they have more muscle mass. They're going to use up more fuel. They're going to need more to replace. So, for example, then by the time I would get to the deadlift, which he didn't do, and his lifts, he said, felt heavy. And I'm like, I feel like this is why. Didn't drink enough carbs in the press.
Are you listening, Brett?
Yeah. So I was just like, so we didn't drink enough carbs then during the press to be able to go into the deadlift. So then I feel like that was, a little bit of a lag there. Okay. So then after that, like for him, because I knew the row was coming up, to be honest, that 3-hour period or so between the total and when he had to go out for the row, there's just so much carbs because I just wanted to make sure his body was completely topped up for that row because that row, it's like running a marathon. And I guess the good thing about me is I've worked with marathon runners. So even though Brent's never done anything like that, I still got the concept of, okay, let's take a person that's done a marathon row. Let's put that concept into that style of training for the row and fuel him accordingly to that. And the good thing about after regionals, he almost cramped up in that 3K one. Yeah. Was it 3, the row run double unders? Yeah. So in between those 2 time frames, we did sweat testing. So I was making sure I found out how much fluid did he actually lose per hour in different styles of training time. So middle of the day, outside, inside, how much did he lose? And I took the mean of that and I was able to work out how much he would lose on the row. So for him, he would have lost about 4.5 kilos just by rowing for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Wow.
Which is excessive, like 8 pounds, it's almost 9 pounds for people that work in pounds, but really, really crazy amount. So for me, then I'm like looking at hydration. So that's what's got to come into it as well, and electrolyte balance, because I don't want him to cramp up in the middle of a row. And you could see that, like, to be honest, because I sat there.
A few people did. One of the females, I think she finished last because she got such bad cramps, but she finished it out, but she was in bits.
I was sitting on the male side for that because I was over there, and I was just absolutely amazed at how little people took on. Like I think it was Rasmus Anderson. He drank like 300 mils of Gatorade or like whatever carb powder, like for the whole thing.
Vellner was saying that Ben Smith, he'd stop, stand up, and he'd just slug, and then get back on and go. And Vellner was like, the old head. He knows that he's at.
Yeah, and that's it. So like, it's a completely different. Like Brent, he was having something every 10 to 15 minutes.
And it just that was just sipping away at his water, like or
so in the water there was carbs. So he never had water. I think only at the end he had water, because I thought. He didn't tell me he changed his mind. He was going to wear a Camelback, and then he changed his mind. So I would have told him to take out more fluid if I knew that, because I only thought he was going to have 2 liters.
Yeah.
So it was good. One of the judges brought out more water, which was good. But like one of the other boys that was in his row, he was hurting, and like he was drinking a protein shake. And I was like, what are you doing?
Oh, damn.
But I was just like, protein at that time of a workout is just not needed. It's really not. So I think in that day,
he thought he was going to lose all his gains doing that row. My muscles going to fade away.
Yeah, for Brent that day, he had 1,100 grams of carbs.
Wow, maybe he needed it.
Yeah, and like you just look at the size of him though, like him in comparison to a person that's 70 kilos, they wouldn't need as much. But like that night, I fed him, I think it was like 3.5 cups of rice, oats, his like carb shakes. And I was just making him drink as much fluid, like electrolyte fluid as well. And I think he still ended up losing about 2 kilos overnight, 2 and a bit kilos overnight.
Were you working with Brent when the competition was in California?
Yeah.
Because
so I did his nutrition for that.
Because the heat obviously was way more of a factor there than it is where the competition is now currently in Minnesota. Is Minnesota?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Wisconsin.
Oh, sorry, Wisconsin. Excuse me. Yeah, sorry, Wisconsin. Yeah. So how did you deal with that?
To be honest, I wasn't even thinking about it at that point. So I think because the workouts weren't as long, I think I get him to add salt to his water. And this is just even my nutrition knowledge increasing over the last few years. As when he did that, I think it's been about 2 or 3 years since he did his last one over there. And so I didn't really think about it too much. Like we talked about it, but nothing to this level. So, even in most workouts, he's always been really good hydration, and he's never cramped. And usually cramps are related to hydration. So whether you haven't drunk enough water, salt intake, and then it's magnesium. So he had never had a cramping issue ever. Never felt dehydrated, anything along those lines. So I've never had anything to worry about until the regionals workout where he did. And that's probably the longest workout in competition, obviously, that we've ever had to deal with. So that's where that testing kind of come from.
Yeah. And just outside of CrossFitters for a second, do you work with any just kind of, well, I suppose general population people, but I suppose even like maybe people who are doing CrossFit or are, still are very much into their health and wellness and their fitness?
To be honest, like 90% are actually just general CrossFitters that I work with.
And how different would your prescription be there now? Obviously, the caloric demands and whatnot, but would, like, say, even with, because someone like Brent or one of the CrossFit Games athletes, because their just caloric requirements are so high, like they can't, like it's probably nearly impossible to get all that in through like proper whole foods, just again belly comfort. So like this is you can probably resonate with this, because this is a conversation I often have with people who just aren't really into nutrition, like just general people. Is that it's very different when your goal is eating for, purely just for performance, where you're using nutritional strategies to, to gain an upper hand for a performance outcome, versus purely just eating for health and wellness. Like they're two completely different things. So like, what would your thoughts be on that? Because the reason I bring that up is you'd all see these documentaries of these athletes. Like there was one here in Ireland with a rugby player called Tommy Bowe, and like his caloric requirements were quite high. And at the end of the day, to hit his caloric requirements, he was eating like biscuits, like, and then like the big thing the next day, like on the radio, I was like, I didn't think elite athletes had bad food at all. And like, people got saying, oh, it was bad food. And it's just like, oh my God, like the amount of context we have to put in place here for people to understand what's going on, because then people are like, well, Tommy Bowe eats biscuits, there has to be okay. Then it's just like, no, you're not understanding this.
To be honest, like even just Brent's nutritional quality is great. Like he doesn't really eat anything. Like the way he gets the extra carbs is literally through just carb shakes. So everything else is just normal food. And that's basically how I work, to be honest. It's all generally a high nutritional quality. But that's the thing. Like you've got to look at it. I still have general athletes. Like they're not that level. They're not at regional level. They're not at, a games level. But they actually still burn through a lot of calories. Like I have one guy that I've been working with really recently, and he eats 4,500 calories a day. He's absolutely shredded, but he's not at that level. Like he's still not fit. He still hasn't got that good quality muscle mass or that engine in comparison. So like, that's the thing. Like I look at it as an everyday athlete. It's not a person that's going to be an athlete, but they still want to be the fittest for their capacity. So, my whole concept is exactly the same, but then how much I put in, calorically is differently, and how many carbs I then put in is completely different. To be honest, protein, no matter who the person is generally the same. Protein never changes. It's probably the most simple thing that I could ever work with is protein. And I don't think anyone could ever give protein a bad rap.
I meant to ask this, with the macronutrients, do you set them off grams per kilo of body weight? Like, so with protein, you just going with 2 grams per kilo of body weight?
2.2.
Oh, I like you like the high range. I like that. We all like our protein, except when we're doing a marathon row. You fool! You fool. I was gonna say, like obviously that guy. Who was it that was drinking the protein? Do you remember?
Oh, he was sitting in the same row as Brent, and he was like 3.
Obviously, he never heard the saying that carbs are protein sparing.
Oh man, who was it? I've never seen him before, so he's obviously. I think he was maybe. To be honest, I have to go and have a look. But I was just so surprised, and you could see he cramped. The med team took him off because once he finished, like they came to him straight away and helped him off. And I guarantee you they had an IV in him out the back, no doubt in my mind. Apparently, because I know a few people on the med team over there, and they had a bunch of people already with IVs out the back for anyone that was really not looking good. So crazy.
So you set protein off grams, and it is the same then with we actually didn't get into fat, by the way, in terms of like what you're setting that at. So protein is grams per body weight, so 2.2 per kilo. Just for the Americans, we're not going up pounds there. That'll be a lot.
No.
So with carbs, are you going up body weight as well in that?
Generally, like I look at it as almost a meal by meal thing. So I try not to push it more than maybe 3 to 4 grams per kilogram. Like it depends on the person. Like if they're pretty chill, just doing the CrossFit class, them having much more than 3 grams, probably unnecessary. And it almost depends as well how much extra body fat they're carrying. Because if they're 100 kilos and a good 30 kilos of that is body fat, I'm not going to give them, an excessive amount of carbs because they don't need it. They have more body fat. So sometimes it depends on how much body fat they're actually carrying.
When you're working with people online out that, do you ask for body shots so you can kind of get a look at their body composition?
Yes. Or some people I've just seen on Instagram, to be honest, so I can work it out. Or like I'll ask them, like once I know how tall they are as well, I kind of can get a pretty good aspect, because some of them will come to me and go, I want to lose 10 kilos. And I'm like, okay, let's just be realistic here, especially on CrossFit. I'm like, you're never really going to lose 10 kilos doing CrossFit unless you've got good 30 kilos to lose.
Yeah, yeah.
But, you know, some people I will get them to if I'm really kind of critical about it, or I'll make them go and get DEXAs in wherever they are. I have a lot of people go and get scans done.
With fats then, what are you doing there? And what sort of type of fats would you mainly recommend to?
I just make up whatever the rest of their calories are, I use up with fat. So if they've got a rest day, I bump up their fat calories and then drop them on their heavy training days, because there's no point putting fat into your body when you're doing, you know, high intensity based training. So, or not as much fat. Where on a rest day, if they're not hungry, they're not training, to prevent them from feeling hungry, I bump up their fat calories so they feel fuller for a longer period of time.
Just, I don't know if you ever heard about like this sort of nutritional periodization. I know some of the teams in England in like it was Derby County, and they weren't in the Premiership at the time, but over at English football, I heard Graham Moore speak about this, you know, where they purposely would have a very low glycogen day, so basically low carb day, and they'd actually have a high fat day on a day where the team were doing like more very low base aerobic recovery or tactical stuff. And the whole idea was that like this can help stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, and then obviously that would help them with aerobic sort of performance and indicators. So then they would load the guys up then with their carbs and glycogen going into that weekend's game. Is that something you've heard of? And would it be ever something you'd play around with maybe with some CrossFitters? Like if they had like, let's say just a very low aerobic day, you might say, right, you're actually kind of nearly almost on a keto type plan for the day. And then like when you go into more your high intensity stuff, or if you have a big heavy piece of the weekend, we can re-upload just to see if that could potentially help aerobic performance due to like potentially mitochondrial biogenesis.
Yeah, it's called, like Louise Burke has actually done a lot of studies on that. It's called training low.
Of course she has. She's done everything in nutrition, sports nutrition.
Love Louise Burke. Just love her. She's good. So like some of the stuff that's come out from that though is like performance-wise, it's almost exactly the same.
Yeah. Okay.
So whether you do either or. So, but in saying that, I still use that concept, but it's not for that reason. It's more if they're trying to see body comp change, instead of me putting them in a calorie deficit every day, because they've still got to train. They still want to be training well and feeling like a normal person day to day.
Yeah.
If they've got one day a week where it's dropped back, it's a low carb day, they're not really getting in a lot of that extra fuel because you don't need it. Like most people are sedentary. Like they're not active. If they're, you know, trading or, you know, they're doing something really hands-on, I'll put more carbs into their day. But if you're sitting down at a desk all day or not really doing anything, then I rein it right back. And that's how I can see good body comp change. And that's what I do actually with a lot of my Olympic weightlifters, because they don't do, you know, cardio because they hate it. That's what I incorporate in instead is I will put in that low calorie or a low carb. And then that's where I might even bring in like an intermittent fasting day as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So they don't actually eat until midday, because then, you know, once you eat in the morning, it stimulates those hunger hormones. So then they're just hungry for the rest of the day. So it's almost like just delaying it, eating a bit later, and then getting those meals in the afternoon. Just
a slight digression here, because you were with Brent in 2016 when the last games were in California.
Yeah.
So just a pure question out of interest, and I suppose even listeners would like to hear this. In your opinion, like how have the game, like what are the games like experience-wise from California to Wisconsin?
Oh, I didn't go. So this was actually my first year going over. So he would always just message me. So that year I wanted to go. No, actually I was in Europe that year. So I'd booked the holiday already. And I just didn't have the cash to then fly.
So this year was your first time there?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
What was it like then, just to be there?
Oh, it was great. It was a really good atmosphere, and especially in the Coliseum, because it was a closed roof. It was just so loud. Everyone was just so excited, and like the athletes were so pumped up, and it's good to, you know, they get to experience that as well. But it was awesome. So I'm really glad I went. And one, it makes life so much easier to plan rather than waking up at 1 a.m. in the morning over here to go, Brent, you need to eat this, because the workouts are released, you know, not too early, you know, much earlier before them.
Yeah.
You know, certain things that we get him to do, because I've got certain strategies I'll have with him depending on the workout that we'll incorporate in. But he knows me well enough; he'll add it in, which was good for last year. But it's just easier.
Yeah.
Message his coach.
not even just like the training, but obviously from your aspect of nutrition, like the difference from Carson, California to
Oh, completely different.
Madison, Wisconsin, like I'd say that
Yeah,
radically changed so many approaches, you know, and again, not just training wise, but nutritional wise. A few little, like, I say these are quick fire round, but your answers can be as long as you want. What would you say have been the biggest lessons you've learned so far in your life? Not even just your career, but even in your life.
Life's hard. It's work. I think just my whole, like the last couple of years, my whole outlook on just how you approach life is very different. Like I think because I've met so many people on different tracks of their life, and like I almost become a bit of a counselor to a lot of people as well. Like if they've been dieting for 20 years or they've been dieting for 10 years, like there's so much emotion that goes into food, and like it's amazing how much it changes your complete life. You know, people that are completely obsessed with it, you know, and I can totally see where it comes from. But I think that why do people eat? Like, to be honest, it's for me, like food makes a very big difference on your life, your quality of life. Because if you're under eating all the time, you are training hard, life is just not fun. And like I see, especially a lot of mums that come in, you know, they've got families to look after and they're exhausted. They don't enjoy time with their family, or even dads, you know, they're not enjoying their life.
Yeah.
And that's because they're trying to be in a deficit. So it's trying to find the balance, or, you know, they've created, you know, all food is bad almost, or you can't eat this food because it's bad food, or this food's not good for me. So then
that has gluten in it.
Oh, mate, it's not paleo. Do you know how many times if I go out, like I think on the weekend, I went to a baby shower and I was eating this tiny little bit of cheesecake, literally like, that's not very healthy, Amy. I'm like, sorry, like I'm eating a little bit of junk food. I'm sorry. You know, so it's even just not taking it to 100%. You know, why do you have to take your diet to 100%? Like if you're not an elite athlete, you don't need to cut weight for like Commonwealth Games or the Olympic Games. Like, do you have to be that, you know, regimented and restrictive? And I think I've gone from that, you know, when I first started CrossFit and I was like that, I was like, nah, it has to be 100%. It has to be a paleo base. It has to be a zone base. And then I've kind of pulled back and realized, you know what, this isn't the way of life. Like it's trying to find that balancing point where you actually enjoy life and you enjoy your friends and your environment, and all of that. So I think it's just more of very much a quality of life based thing that I'm looking at now, rather than you have to be one way or the other, you know, either good or bad.
From me personally, what really liberated me was learning Eric Helms's nutritional hierarchy through Danny Lennon. Like Danny was the resource where I found out about it. So do you know Eric Helms? He's actually based in New Zealand. He's American, but he's based in New Zealand. So he works at a company called 3D Muscle Journey. And like his hierarchy would be very similar to Dr. Mike Isertel's one with Renaissance Periodization, who are also American. Renaissance actually work with Rich Froning now and CrossFit Mayhem. Nick Shaw, the CEO, he was on one of their podcasts before. But basically, Eric has this hierarchy, and he's like, you know, if your goal is body composition or performance or even health, now, he's like, his thing is if it's health, then your food choice, like the quality of your food needs to obviously be way better than if it's just purely for body comp or performance. But basically has this 5-tier hierarchy, and like he's like, the most important thing is your energy in, energy out, so your calories in and calories out. Then the next most important thing to look at and get right is your macronutrient breakdown, so your proteins, your carbs, your fats for your body weight and your particular event or sport or whatever you're doing in daily life. Then the next thing he looks at is micronutrient breakdown and water and fiber, and then actually he goes macros with fiber, and then he goes micro nutrients with water. Then the fourth most important thing is timing and frequency, and then the fifth and least most important thing is supplements. So basically, like he goes from most important to least important, and most important then is your calories in, calories out, your macros, your micros, timing and frequency, and supplements. And like kind of when I saw that, it was liberating, because basically what the likes of Eric and Mike Israel were saying is like, you know, what people started to do for years was and there's another very good Irish nutritionist over here called, named Daniel Davey. And Daniel said the same. Like, he was asked, what have you changed your mind on? And he says, when I first got into nutrition, I was putting way too much emphasis on quality and not really like realizing the principles of nutrition, which is like energy out, like the quantity, and like making sure you're just basically hitting the big rocks, which is like your calories, your macros, and your micros. And then he's just like, the actual quality is way down the pecking order. Like, if you want optimal health, maybe that bumps up, but it still wouldn't override, the laws of thermodynamics, like energy out. Because I remember too, like, I was just all about food quality, like, and I was like fat, and I was like, how am I so fat? And I was like, because I was eating like way too much sweet potato and mince. That's why. So like, I just didn't have any appreciation. But the point I'm trying to get across here is that it's liberating that what happened for a long time was people were like, oh, that food makes you fat, or that food is bad. And it's just like, no food in and of itself can inherently make you fat. Like, if your caloric needs were 2,000, we'll just put it at that, a nice easy number, and all I gave you was 500 calories a day of the shittiest food ever, there's no way you can gain weight. Now, your body composition all will go to shit, but your weight, like, you'll So
and that's what look at it.
Go ahead.
It's actually your body composition change, and I think that's what actually probably annoys me the most about if it fits your macros based thing is like, if you don't learn to eat the macros at the right time of the day, sure, if you eat 800 grams, if you eat 200 grams of carbs at night when you're the least active, that's not going to help you out. Or if you catch up your calories at night of protein when you haven't eaten them regularly throughout the day, that's not going to help you gain muscle mass. So that's a huge thing. Is that's great to get your macros in, but then how you're timing it, how is it, then is situated in around your training. So that's, it's a huge thing. Very, very, very huge.
Like, again, the thing with I also say to people with if it fits your macros, like I'm always like, you can get shredded on something like if it fits your macros, but there's a few like disadvantages. One is you're going to be more hungry because the foods you're eating aren't as fulfilling, because whole foods obviously are more filling. And in the long run, if you stick to that long enough, you're going to fuck yourself up from a micronutrient standpoint. You're going to start running into issues like with micronutrient balance.
And that's what you see. And like, for me, it's really hard because as a nutrition body here in Australia, like our dietetic association, they won't let us ever do testimonials. So I'm not allowed to go, okay, this is what this person's done and this is how much they've changed. Where any other person out there that's a nutrition coach or has, a company that does macro base, they can show all these changes and I can't. So it gets really frustrating because I go, okay, well, my clients are doing fantastic, but I can't show their results because I'm not I lose my dietetic name as a result of that. So it's really frustrating because I can see my clients change and then I can see what these people are doing. But, my clients see change, but they train well. Their energies are high. They have a good, quality of life. They actually feel like when they wake up in the morning, they've got energy to get throughout the day. So it's the hard part. And to be honest, it's my biggest frustration within the whole thing I was talking about today, actually.
That is a load of bullshit, isn't it? That you can't do that. You're gonna have to move, Amy. Can you hop over to New Zealand or something and then get to testimonials and then just come back?
Yeah, come back. They'd be like, no, you're not allowed to renew your name. Because it's for people to get private health insurance rebates, we need the dietetic name. So, it's like there's plenty of dietitians over here that don't have the accredited name. And so they say they're a dietitian, but they don't have the accreditation there, and then they can do all the testimonials that way if they want. So. Okay,
so getting into the last few questions. So we did our first one there, so your biggest life lessons. So kind of you were saying that, just to not be as kind of dogmatic maybe about, And it's a really good point because I've had this conversation too with a few people, and Danny Lennon being one too. Danny Lennon has the podcast Sigma Nutrition, and he's like very well known in terms of nutritional world. He's Irish, he's a good friend of mine. Yeah. Like the conversation we've had before is like, what is true health? And the reason I say this is because, right, like, a lot of people think, health is like, living like a monk and every meal's perfect and your sleep's perfect and exercise every day, But then you're like, is that healthy? Because like, one, there's no variability to that. And like, if it becomes such routine and so certain, it actually becomes a stressor in and of itself. Now you're in a stress response and that can't be healthy. Whereas if you have that more sort of 30,000 square foot view of like, listen, this cheesecake that you were talking about there that I'm eating, like, I understand in the grand global scheme of things, like, like, I understand where this fits in the context. So like, I understand, like, I get it. I can't even formulate the words to kind of try what I'm saying, but you know what I mean? Like, I understand, I get where this cheesecake fits in the whole grand scheme of this unified theory of everything, you know? So whereas, you know, other people, like, you know, they just have this narrow scope of like, oh, that, because again, like, that food is bad, I heard. Well, how could you be eating that? It's just like, it's almost, the stress of that is like not healthy. You know what I mean? Like, whereas like if you understand where everything is in the context, you're like, that's true health.
Yeah. And that's it. Like for me, my look of health is one, you know, because I've got the DEXA machine. I can go, there's certain fat markers you can look at and go, okay, the visceral fat, so the fat that sits around your organs, how much you actually got of that. So I can go, okay, this is too high, we need to reduce that. You know, your fat mass index, the BMI, so it's telling you how much fat you're carrying for your height. So if that's within range, we're good. If all your blood markers are healthy and you're feeling good, then it's just personal preference.
Yeah.
You know, like, it doesn't have to be what anyone else wants you to be. It's what you want to be, you know? So I think that's a big thing, you know, even just advice to people is you don't have to be what everyone else wants you to be. You can be who you want to be, you know? It's a very, very individual thing. And even just nutrition, like, I can't give the same plan to every single person because everyone's different. You know, if I told a person that to eat a bunch of carbs that shouldn't be eating a bunch of carbs because they retain fluid because they have edema, different story, you know? So it's, you know, it's very, very individual. So they don't have to be, you know, who they want, if someone else wants them to be. They can just be.
Exactly. Context is everything. And also too, like, there's so much more to health than just, and I'm not downplaying the role of nutrition, obviously, but like, there's like socializing health with the other human being. You know, there's obviously like sleep health, exercise health, just general, like, your thoughts on a moment-to-moment basis health, you know, and obviously nutrition filters into a lot of those areas too, in terms of how well those areas are going. But like, what I mean by even like social health, like if you get so wrapped up, and this is why, like I was saying, Eric Helms' nutritional hierarchy was like so liberating for me, because like, oh, once I hit my calories and my macros, and I understand this, like, I'm not going to get fat if I eat this, you know what I mean? Like, okay, it might be the healthiest thing, but I'm not like going to wake up tomorrow morning and my abs are gone, or do you know what I mean? Or even in the long run, in terms of pure health and wellness, it's not going to do, like, anything acutely is not going to do anything to your health and wellness in the long run. Actually, it'll probably make you more robust in terms of, like, if you think about concepts like hormesis and stuff like that. But, you know, it makes it more liberating. It's like, oh, I can actually go out to dinner now and I can socialize and be like, yes, actually, I can eat that, you know? Like, that's more healthy than be like, no, I have to stick to this because this is healthy physically. But it's like, yeah, but now your mental, emotional, and your ability to relate to other humans is like way in the tank. And like,
and then you're building up that bad relationship with food, and then scared of eating everything and anything. And like, I'll take even back to when I first started CrossFit, and before I had any idea on nutrition, because like our first year or two is nothing to do with nutrition. It's just science. So we didn't really learn anything. And that's when I started CrossFit, and that's where paleo came into it, because that's what everyone did when you first start CrossFit, is paleo. And so I'm going down this track, and like, my life was so hard. Like, I would sleep, like, I trained 5 or 6 days a week, but I was exhausted. I was run down. I got sick often, just because I wasn't getting it enough. But it's just amazing. Like, that was just what you had to do. If you're a CrossFitter at the beginning, you're starting, if you're not doing paleo, you're out. Like, that's just not cool. And I remember even I think it was my first ever seminar that I ran. And like, I'm even just talking, I went out to dinner with everyone, and they're like, oh, that's not paleo what you're eating. That's not paleo. Like, it's very much a community-based thing. And now it's not paleo, it's like keto, or it's intermittent fasting. If you're not doing keto in this gym, then it's like you're almost not welcome. So I think that's almost even a hard part about that community side of CrossFit, is like, this is the way we do it here. If you don't do it like this, then we don't really want that much to do with you. It's crazy, but at least that's what it's like over here in a lot of gyms or places that I've seen.
Oh yeah, it's same everywhere. Yeah, it's the intermittent, like, okay, I like intermittent fasting, I'm the most universal human you can meet. Like so, I'm never dogmatic about anything. I always say this jokingly. The only dogmatic belief that I have is not to have a dogmatic belief. but what
there's don't get me wrong, there's all places for those types of diets. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I have no issues with some people doing keto and some people doing intermittent fasting, not at all. But, you know, depending on who you are, just because that person does it and it's good for them doesn't mean it's good for you.
It's all context, and like the thing I always say about these different, you know, diets or nutritional protocols is that they're methods, And if they do work for someone, it's because they met certain principles. So again, like the principles to me are what in Eric Helms' hierarchy. So energy out, macros, micros, timing, and then, supplements will be the last thing. But the main thing is energy out, your macros. Because like you see people going, well, like people are like, I lost weight on keto, and I lost weight vegan, I lost weight paleo. And like, if you were just like, yes, and the underlying mechanism was calorie deficit, calorie deficit, calorie deficit.
Yeah. And it's so hard from my perspective, because if I say that to my clients that come in, they then get really offended. Because they're like, oh, no, but this is what I'm like, well, then why are you here, number one? But, that's even just people online. So if I put up something about fasting, I put something up about keto, they're like, no, I'm like, well, no, this is like the general populace. You don't have to follow it. I know plenty, like I've got a client that's, a couple clients that are fasting because that's what they have to do, because they've got conditions that they need to. So it's really, really hard. You just get nailed, I feel like, no matter where you go from people. It's like there's a keyboard warrior out there waiting to like just jump on you and attack you.
But I love like these when people try to use like these evolutionary arguments, like they're almost like logical fallacies, in that so like with intermittent fasting, well, we're designed to go hours and days without eating, so like surely this is how we've evolved. And I always just imagine like us being time warped back to then, like having food and going up to the caveman, would you like to eat this? Oh, if I could give you that every few hours, would you like that? Yes, I would. Do you mean you don't like going 16 or 24, 40 hours without food? No, that really sucks. If I could eat. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this time definitely wrap up questions.
Okay. Could talk for hours about food.
No, it's me too. It's me too. Oh, we're both talkers. It's good. So we did lessons. What would be your top resources to the audience? And by the way, your resource now can be anything. It doesn't just have to be around nutrition. It could be like a life resource. So it could be a book, a course, a person, an online resource, an online course, anything, like something that you think would benefit everyone in their daily life.
Oh my goodness, Louise Burke. Have I said her name enough?
Yeah.
She's written a really couple good books, like clinical sports nutrition, that anything I've ever talked about like so far or want to talk about, like, high, like training low. She's written in about that. Like there's just so much information in there and it's all really well detailed. So that's literally my sports nutrition Bible.
Yeah.
Like it's just life, and I will refer back to that plenty of times. What's good for like here in Australia, we've got like, again, 2 different associations. So we have like our normal dietitian one, but then we have our sports dietitian Australia, and they send out every month or every couple of weeks just new research articles. So for me, it's all about research, because if you haven't got something to base it on, then it's just hearsay, really. Like there's people that you can work for and you kind of get an idea, it can change around, but so luckily we get that sent out. There's a place called, there's a web page called, I think it's Nutrition Education Australia, and it's really good. Like it's got a lot of different topics, all about different types. So if you have PCOS, it's education and nutrition. That's what it's called.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put it in the show.
Education and nutrition. So it's got everything. It's got webinars. So you can look at things for PCOS, if you have diabetes, like just basics stuff, like just learning about food and what food is. And it's really, really interesting. So they're the main ones that I use. And then we just lucky, we pay a certain amount. They send us all the webinars and things for us to look at. And it's enough for me to kind of just add on. Yeah.
How do you learn? So, and what I mean by that question is, how do you go about acquiring and then applying knowledge?
I think sometimes, to be honest, it's a bit of practice as well. So like for me, whatever I've read, like that's new come out, I'll change it and put it in some of my clients, test it out, see if it works. If it doesn't, then I'll kind of push it off and do it. But now that I've kind of got the gist of it, because I've done CrossFit nutrition for a good 4.5 years, I kind of just get the concept of it. So once I see a person, or for me, to be honest, watching people train makes a very big difference for me to be aware at how hard they're pushing.
Mm-hmm.
So if they've put up videos or they've sent me videos and I can watch them actually train hard, I can change their nutrition up for what they're doing. So for me, it's a very observing thing. So watching what people's capacity actually is and being able to implement that into their diet. What else? Probably, I don't know. There's not that many other people that I've really trust, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just because it's so much like people pull things from other different things, and I'm like, no, it's just it makes me angry, to be honest.
But in terms then, like, so would you be like a note taker, or are you like a whiteboard person where you brain mash?
I love drawing. I am a drawer.
Yeah. So you're visual, like a visual sort of like.
Yeah. And like, I'm not a good drawer. And I say this to every single client that comes in, because I draw pretty much every session that I have with a client. I'll draw things as well, just because it makes so much sense. And so whatever I've learned, I'll then replicate in my consults and go, okay, this is how it works. And everyone tends to pick that up a lot more.
Yeah.
So you like muscle glycogen. I talk about that, and the style of training. And then I'll put that into a person's day. So like if they're training in the morning, I've got the cell, use up the muscle energy, replace it with certain foods. If they don't replace it with foods, you use less energy than, whatever their lifestyle is like. They're like, oh my goodness, it's my life in a series of circles and arrows and lines. It's great.
You're a nerd. I love it.
Yeah,
no, because for me personally, the best way I find to learn is to teach. So like if I was to go, say, like learn about like carb loading, I would go research it. So usually read up on it. I usually probably get a textbook, read up on a textbook. Then I'd go in that textbook. I might see who the person was that wrote that chapter or whatever, or that piece, and then see if there any interviews or papers by them, listen to podcasts with them or a YouTube video. And then I start putting a PowerPoint presentation together as if I was to teach it, So I always find teaching helps to consolidate knowledge, but it's always interesting to hear different people's ways of
I like to learn it. I was actually talking about it with a client yesterday who's studying, and we're like our best way, like my best way, even at uni, was to read it and then write it out and then teach it or say it to another person and talk it out or have a conversation about it, because until you really have a good conversation about it, it doesn't really sink in.
Yeah. I find if you can try and make someone understand it, like when you're having a conversation, if you can portray the message to them, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Now I do understand. Yeah. So what would be? I know you mentioned Louise Burke's book, but is there any books outside of nutrition that you would highly recommend? So my question here for you is, what are you currently reading, and what would your top book recommendation be outside of sports nutrition? Like if you had to gift the book.
I don't if it's a proper, like I'm reading a book because I actually have time to read a book, it would be like just a basic crime novel, to be honest, because that's
okay. Yeah.
But outside of that, like I don't have time to read. I'm too busy working.
Okay, well, fair enough. That's
almost got a third clinic up and running, so my life is literally
fuck.
Yeah. So if I'm not like working or like doing my actual nutrition learning, like I'm going to go back next year and study, actually.
Really?
Which I'm very excited about.
PhD?
No, it's an IOC sports nutrition course. So it's based in the UK.
Brilliant.
And it's a 2-year course, I'm pretty sure. So it starts in February. So I'm actually really excited because I haven't done a big, long burst of study since I graduated. Like there's points later in my life.
Do you have to move?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
But literally, it's all online.
Brilliant.
But yeah, so that's probably my next thing to do. Like I want to do a PhD later in life, but not yet. I actually really want to be a uni lecturer. Like that's my long-term goal, because I love teaching nutrition. Like it's my favorite thing. Like doing seminars and running seminars. It's just like I'm in my element because I get to talk.
We're cut from the same stone, because I'm currently doing my master's in strength and conditioning, but my long-term goal is to get a PhD and teach and do research.
Yeah, because it's just so interesting. Like, and being able to, do it. Because I wanted to be a teacher when I was a kid, but then I'm like, I don't want to deal with kids and teenagers. That's not cool.
When we speak again in a few years, we'll be Dr. Burke and Dr. Cox.
That's it. Sounds good. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. We'll keep that pack now. And it's live now. It's on the internet forever. Last two for you. So for whatever reason, probably Elon Musk has figured it out already. You only have 1 year left on Earth. I used to always say you've 1 year left to live, and I was like, that's probably a little bit too dark.
Yeah.
So now I've just changed it. You've just 1 year left on Earth. How would you spend that 1 year left on Earth, and why would you spend it?
I would take like some of my good friends or like really close friends or family. And to be honest, I would just go hiking as many places as I possibly can, because I love nature. Like For me, whenever I go away on holidays, that is my one thing, is to find as much nature as I possibly can and be outside, because I'm sitting in a desk inside all day, every day. So something that's complete extreme to that. And that's, to be honest, I would just do that and find as many places as I possibly can and just make sure I've got some good people around me that I, love being around.
Definitely go from the same zone, because that's the same as me. I love hiking. I lived in Arizona for 3 months. I was doing an internship there. And even though it is desert, the hikes there are unbelievable. Like, just some great trails. It's like you're on Mars, though. Everything's red. It's like, I'm on Mars. But it was pretty cool. Last question for you. I love this one. You can take your time with it. And what I'll say to you is just be in the moment, be authentic. Because I ask this and people go, oh,
this question isn't here. You haven't told me this question.
No, I can't. When people ask for questions before shows, I'm like, I'll give them all the questions except this one.
This one.
Yeah, because it needs to be authentic in the moment. So I'm over in Australia. I'm in now, make sure I'm pronouncing this right. I say Brisbane. Is that right? Or is it Brisbane?
Brisbane, yeah. Yeah, we say Spain. It depends.
It depends. Anyway. I'm over there, so I am, and I say, hey, Amy, we're going to go for dinner. I'm going to take you out, and you can invite 5 people to this dinner. Any 5 people. They can be dead or alive. Who would you bring to this dinner and why?
Oh, just random people. Jeez.
Yeah, it can be anyone, yeah.
Oh.
Like, they could be dead, alive, famous, relatives, whatever. Anyone.
I'd probably bring my sister. I'll be honest right there, because my sister's like my mum. She basically looks after me, tells me all the things in life.
That's not Pelu, Amy. Shut up, sister.
No. Oh, actually, she'll probably give you. She's like, oh yeah, good job. I don't know who else would I bring. I don't know. I'm pretty chill. I don't really care too much, to be honest.
Is there anyone you ever would have liked to have met or spoke to, or?
Not really. To be honest, I am probably the most. If as long as someone makes good conversation with me, that will increase my knowledge of some kind, I'm good. So whoever that is, I don't really care. But it's one of the hardest questions you could probably ask me.
So would Dr. Burke probably be there then? Because she'll increase.
Oh, she could be. Yeah. So I guess that's it. It would just be all people that I've then. That's a hard question. I would bring Louise. Yes, definitely.
So we have your sister, we have Louise. You got 3 more vacancies there.
Oh, geez, mate. This is a hard question.
I know. That's why I ask it.
You're going to be sitting here for another 10 minutes trying to work it out. I feel like you could go along because we've already had such good conversation. We could talk about a million other different things about food.
Well, I have to pay because I'm invited, so.
Oh, you already are invited. Damn. So go figure out another 3. Jeez, mate.
Surely, is there anyone you're like, that's an interesting person I might like to, like a Nelson Mandela or, I don't know, an Abe Lincoln, or I'm just putting those names out there, by the way. Martin Luther King.
Yeah. I don't know. To be honest,
I kind of like when people are like this. Who's like, no, not really. No. I'm kind of so happy in my own skin that I just go with the wind.
To be honest, yeah, that's me. I'm pretty chill about it all. As long as I've got good conversation, I am in a good space.
Yeah, and good food. I'd get grumpy if the food was bad. This food.
Oh yeah, good food. I'm all about good food. I was expecting you to go, oh yeah, where are we going for dinner? I'm like, oh, I've got this great place around the corner, Vietnamese food. Can tell you this is where I thought the conversation was going. Where do you want to go eat? I'm like, oh, there's a place just down the road.
Well, if you want me to switch the question, so I am in town. What would we go out to eat then?
Oh, there is a really good Vietnamese. No joke. There's actually a really good Vietnamese food down the road. It's Sweet. 800 meters from my place, and it is delicious. All fresh. Love it. Good seafood.
Is it like one of these where you walk in and go, the usual Amy? Is it almost like that?
No, that's my coffee shop.
Ah, okay.
They know me very well there. It's actually quite scary. Probably.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. That actually reminds me. Sorry, I did forget one question. This is what is there one thing you do every day that you find is very important to your day? If you don't do it, you feel like just the day's not right. Is there one ritual? because the coffee reminded me of that, because most people are like, it's my coffee.
Yeah, coffee is important, but I can live without it. Like when I came to the States, I was like, I'm too scared to drink coffee over there, because I was just like, I've heard such bad things. So I'm not wasting money.
That's like me actually when I go over with their meat in their supermarkets. I'm like, hormone free. I'm like, is it really? It still looks kind of green and like luminous.
I think I had like 3 coffees over there, and I was disappointed too. Like there was one time it was alright, and I was just surprised. To be honest, for me, it's really important to train.
Okay.
Just because I have so much going on in my day, and I just do Olympic weightlifting now. So like I don't do CrossFit. If I don't get to go and train, I am a grumpy person.
Yeah, me too.
And my coach can attest to them. Definitely will be like, Amy.
Yeah.
It's not happening. Or if I injure myself, I'm not a nice person to be around. I go sit in my corner and I just don't talk to anyone. Not good.
All right. Amy Cox, that was fantastic. Thanks so much for making time for me in your evening, my morning. But where can the listeners find out more about you?
If you want to go to my website, www.targetnutrition.com.au, there's plenty about me. I've got blogs up there, so if you want to learn about anything, really, it's there. And then also our Instagram page. That's probably the biggest thing that we use for social media, because I'm lazy and I don't like marketing much, so I just use Instagram. Let's be honest.
Well, I don't think you can call yourself lazy when you have like your third practice being opened up. I think it's understandable that you're not.
I'm too busy like giving my time to everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Which I appreciate from me here, by the way.
No, that's fine. So that's probably a big, and it's just Target Nutrition. Definitely give us a follow. We're pretty funny. Well, I like to be funny.
All right, sweet. This is a great episode. I'd love to have you back on again, and we'll probably we can maybe get some listener questions around like nutrition for CrossFit and whatever else. But
sounds good.
Just for all the listeners, everything that we spoke about will be in the show notes. And for now, take care, be well, and stay strong.